Hello, my name is Felicia and usually I'm the one behind the camera, but today I'll be in front of the camera chatting to 3 independent comedians for the upcoming Melbourne International Comedy Festival. So we'll see how that goes. Great. I'm here with Charisa Bossinakis. Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for joining me.
No, thank you for having me.
What motivated you to pursue comedy?
Well, I've never really wanted to do comedy. Like, I feel if you told me 12 years old that I'd be doing stand-up, I wouldn't have believed you, but I've always been obsessed with it. I remember when I was about 5 years old, my dad would stay up late to watch the Chappelle Show, and I'd always creep in trying to watch, and I was like, why is he laughing so much? So yeah, I've just always loved it. I binged it in high school. I was obsessed with, SNL and Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. But it wasn't until uni I did a bit of improv, and that's sort of what started me doing a bit of stand-up and, dabbling in comedy. And I had a really good tutor who encouraged me to do stand-up. So
when you were learning improv, what were some of the fundamental skills that you learned that you've incorporated into your comedy now?
Yeah, it was so funny because I felt like me and my friend, we had a really bad habit of gaslighting the actors. Like, you're usually supposed to say yes and then you build on it so you can create a scene. So, for example, if I came up to you and be like, oh, madam, do you need any help with your groceries? I would be like, what are you talking about? We're in a library. And everyone hated us in the class. But there's some good skills. I think it's good for crowd work, and sometimes if you forget your material especially, you're used to riffing and you can kind of pull it out of your sleeve or whatever. But improv's a really good way to start out in comedy because you're there, you're doing it with other people, whereas stand-up, it's just you're by yourself on stage. So I think initially that can be quite intimidating, but yeah, I think as you said before, there's so many foundations of improv that work really well for stand-up, especially crowd work and, if you kind of want to riff off your own material. So I'd suggest improv's always a good way to start out with it.
Wonderful. And so with comedy, or humour I should say, what is it about humour that draws you in?
Oh God, I don't know. I feel like I come from such a funny family. We're so dysfunctional. I don't know, everyone says oh, we've got a dysfunctional family, but I don't know if it's something that I'm drawn to as opposed to I think it's just so built into who I am. And, I come from a very silly family. We don't take things seriously. We always pick on each other. We've always had a very savage sense of humor, and we just make fun of each other continuously. So I just think I think it's just something you either grow up with and it's so intrinsic to who you are, or, people just don't bother with it, but, So this year I'm in a 50-seater, so I think it's just making sure that, we really stick to capacity, whereas, last comedy festival, even if you did sell out and you had a few people who still wanted to sell tickets, sometimes we'd sneak them in. But now you can't really do that because of COVID. So it's just mainly sticking to, the venue capacity, and it's good for local artists in a sense because we don't have international comedians coming in. So it's very much focused on, local artists, and hopefully they can shine this year.
Yeah, I feel like the playing field has evened up a little bit, and hopefully more local artists can get more exposure. So what's something from your show, you can share as much or as little as you'd like, what's something that you're most looking forward to sharing with your audience when you perform?
Sharing with my audience? I think this show, I'm quite, oh God, it sounds so gross, but I'm quite vulnerable this year in my show, whereas previous years, it was definitely kind of building myself up. I was my own hype girl, whereas this year I talk a lot about being a former chubby kid and getting revenge on a childhood bully. So it's definitely a different side of my comedy and, what I'm comfortable with sharing on stage. So yeah, it's just, it's a lot about my childhood and rooted in the fact that I was a fat kid and no one wanted to sit with me at lunch. So, but I think in that, a lot of funniness comes from that though, as well. Yeah, so it's a lot about my childhood and growing up and how my parents were a little bit unconventional. So yeah, I definitely haven't tackled those subject matters before. So I think it'll be fun to do that this year.
So a more personal show this time around.
Yeah, absolutely.
So lastly, Charisa, can you please tell us when and where we can see your comedy festival show?
I'll be performing from the 24th of March, so this Wednesday, until the 3rd of April at the Carlton Club on Burke Street.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for having me.